I would like to welcome everyone to today's webinar event on accounting subtotals. My name is Joshua and I'm going to be your presenter today. Welcome to everyone. Before we get started on our topic, accounting subtotals today, just a few things. Click the little red arrow on the sidebar of your webinar control panel to minimize that, webinar page there and get that out of your way. This is particularly important if you have a single monitor setup, or if you've got a dual monitor, just drag that off to your second desktop. Allows you to get the full visual effect of the presentation here today. We are recording today's webinar event. While we do have webinars or recordings of previous webinar events on subtotals, I'm going to show you those here momentarily. We will have release this one on our support center page here sometime within the next week or 10 days or so. So if we go into here, our churchwindows.com, go to the support center or /support, and we simply click here under the search and type in subtotals, click enter or hit search. Right here, we've got our previous accounting subtotals for either version 17 and newer, or, that's it. So yeah, accounting subtotals, that's a video on that. There's other things on subtotals for like donations and what have you, but we definitely have one out there for accounting subtotals already as well. This event will be on our website again sometime within the next week or 10 days too. Please enter questions to me in the questions portion of the webinar control panel. I will do my best to keep an eye on those. I'm pretty good about repeating the questions for everyone's benefit, and then we'll see what we can't do to get those questions answered for you. Please keep the questions on our topic at hand, in this case subtotals. If you have other questions about other portions of the software, again, either call our support staff, myself included, or maybe look at the free online webinars page and see if there's an upcoming event that may answer your questions or be on the topic that you have a question about. Okay. Finally, our topic today is taken from our A102 accounting workbook, pages 22 to 26. If we go back to our website, Church Windows, right here under beginning, we've got our training workbooks. Those can be purchased online. The downloadable versions are $12 each, very, very inexpensive. We try to, keep these webinars in line with those workbooks as much as possible to kind of help create a good through line for folks in terms of training and getting them up to speed for Church Windows. So if you're interested in those and don't already have them, you can go right into our website and download those today or purchase those. All right, so if we are looking, basically, if we go to the page 22 there, talking about creating subtotals, subtotals are simply ways of being able to better organize our reports, make them more interesting and easier to read. Examples of subtotals, if I go to, say, our, treasurer's report, we have groupings of accounts for things like total salaries and total office expenses and total donations income. And on our treasurer's report here, subtotals are identified by these bold groupings at the bottom here, okay, below each one of those accounts. Those are our subtotals, okay? Accounts can virtually go into any subtotal you want, and they can be rearranged accordingly, okay? So let's get back here, and so they offer an entirely different level of flexibility too, I might add as well, okay? And if you're interested in, a lot of folks are like, well, what's the difference between a subtotal versus a sub-account? I'm going to recommend that you go out to the website and review the video on subtotals versus sub-accounts, folks. We don't have time to get into that today. That's not what today's topic is about, but if you're interested in that, that video's out there as well. So when we go into manage accounts here on the top left and go to our subtotals, again, subtotals are a way of organizing our accounts, making them easier to read and understand, grouping them together for reporting purposes. you have a lot of flexibility and control in terms of what the subtotals do, okay? So when we come into our main subtotals window here, we set up what are considered the five preset subtotals: total assets, total liabilities, total fund balance, total income, and total expenses. Those are the broadest level subtotals that we can have in any one of those 5 account types. Those are the 5 account types that Church Windows has and supports, okay, the accounts themselves. So nothing can be more broad than any of these 5, okay? All of our other subtotals that we create will total into any one of these 5 subtotals, okay? That's really important to understand, because these are the broadest level. These include every single one of our, say, assets, or all of our liabilities, or all of our fund balances. When new accounts are added to our chart of accounts, depending on the type of account that's being added, it's going to automatically want to add it into total assets or liabilities or fund balances, income or expense, because it knows what type of an account that is, okay? But it doesn't automatically move the accounts into their proper subtotal. You, as the user, have to do that, okay? All right, so to create a new subtotals can be added at any time as needed, folks. So let's say, for example, we need to create a subtotal on our chart of accounts or on our reports for our long-term assets. So we have total current assets and investments and total fixed assets. We now want to split out, our main checking account and things like that would be considered current assets. We see things like savings or investments, CDs, money market. Those may not necessarily be considered current assets. We're now wanting to categorize those differently and create a new subtotal called total long-term investments or total long-term assets. So when we want to create a new subtotal, we're going to go down here and hide our accounts again. We have to start by choosing the subtotal that the new subtotal is going to be added or total into, okay? So in this case, it's separate from current assets and investments and fixed assets, but will be totaled into total assets. So we're going to click on total assets, and we're going to click add new subtotal down here in the bottom left. And notice here now, if we collapse down everything and expand our total assets, we now have a new arrow in here called total, and our cursor is now flashing here in the upper right-hand corner, ready for us to enter a new name, okay? So we're going to call this total long-term assets. And if we want to introduce the accounts on our reports, we're going to choose display as header. And this is not required, folks. It again just makes it's more reporting options and flexibility for you. We don't have to create header accounts. We can create this text that basically says, hey, here are the accounts that are about to follow. And we're going to call this one, we're going to click there under header text, and we're going to call this long-term. If I could type today, long-term assets. And now when we go over to steer our focus back left over here to our new subtotal, notice it now shows the name, total long-term assets. Step 1 is complete, okay? Next, now, we have to move the desired accounts into that respective subtotal. So now we go down to the bottom and click on the button down here. Let me get my highlighter right down here called Show Accounts, okay? So when we click on Show Accounts, it now, when we click on any of them, it's going to reveal the accounts that are inside of them. But our current accounts, which are moving into long-term assets, are already inside our current assets and investments. So we're going to move those. So whether they were just sitting under total assets or wherever they are, we still have to move them into the new subtotal we've created, okay? So there's 2 ways we can move accounts into a subtotal, okay? So let's say our Lynn Schwab investment account is a long-term asset. We're going to move that down there. We would highlight it, hold down our left mouse button, pick it up and drag it down right on top of the arrow called Total Long-Term Investments and let go. And notice it pops Lynn Schwab Investments now into that subtotal, okay? The other way to move it is if we click on, say, National City CD, over here on the right-hand side, okay, right here, move, National City 2, and notice it defaults to total assets. We're not going to do that. We're going to click the down arrow. We're going to choose long-term assets, click Move Account, and notice again, National City CD moves down under its correct subtotal, okay? So 2 ways we can move those accounts, all right? So let's see here. Yeah, we're going to say that those are our long-term assets for the time being. There might be more, maybe money market might be, or savings might be considered a long-term asset. But we're not going to make those changes now. We can always change them later if we wish. Now, what if we don't like the order of these? So maybe I want my fixed assets to be below my long-term assets. It's always going to add those at the bottom. So what I'll do now is I'll click Hide Accounts, and now I'm going to highlight my fixed asset subtotal here, the one I want to move. You can move any of them. And over here on the right-hand side, we've got our little up and down arrows right here. Okay, so everyone should see my arrow, and we're going to click the little down arrow there to move that down, and we notice fixed assets now pushes down to the bottom below our long-term assets. So now our accounts on our report should be in our desired order. Okay, so if we were to go up to, say, Reports and Export, Financial Balance Sheet, and we now click on Print. So here we see our, let me zoom in a little bit here. We should see our current assets and investments, our subtotal for our long-term assets, and our fixed assets, all 3 totaling into total assets. Okay? And just by way of explaining, folks, the header text that might have been generating some confusion for folks, right here, this current assets, long-term assets, and fixed assets, the text that appears before the accounts, that is our header text, okay? So again, just makes the reports easier, perhaps to read, a little more clear for folks to understand when we're, when we're distributing and giving them the reports that they're supposed to understand, okay? So lots and lots of flexibility here with regards to subtotals. Okay. So on page 25 now, to edit a subtotal, if we wanted to come in here and change something, we can come in here, you can highlight a particular subtotal, and then over here on the right, just where it says subtotal name, just simply, edit that name, and that will change that subtotal name for you. Okay. So maybe we want to take off investments on here since we've moved some of those. So we highlight that, click on the name, take off and investments, and now leave it as total current assets, and that will change that name. All of the accounts that were originally in it will still be in that particular subtotal, but all we've done is change the name. Okay. And I would do the same thing with header text if applicable. Okay, I kind of did a little out of order, but the page 25 there at the bottom talks about arranging the subtotal order, again, using those up and down arrows on the right. And that's true for any of them, folks. So if I go down here to say total expenses, where I've got a whole bunch more, you can highlight a subtotal, and again, using the arrow, up and down arrow, assuming they're at the same level, they can be reordered. Okay? All right, finally, when I wish to delete a subtotal, all of the accounts that are inside a particular subtotal have to be moved out of it in order to be deleted, okay? So right here we see the arrow here at the bottom of our total, new subtotal. That doesn't have a plus sign next to it. Notice these others do. That's revealing the accounts. The accounts look like a little sheet of paper icon, and they have the name with the account number in parentheses, okay? Accounts, folks, are listed here in name order, and even though on reports they may sort numerically, You know, it depends on whether which columns you have added to your reports. They just list alphabetically here, not numerically. Okay, but then one called total new subtotal has no accounts in it. So I can go right down here and notice that my delete button is available. If I go up to something like total designated, it won't let me click delete. Okay, why? Because there are accounts in it. So if I want to be able to delete a subtotal, I have to remove or move the accounts out of it to someplace else. Okay, so let's just say, so notice here I've now got I've got an account under my total new subtotal called, you know, save the dogs expense. So I can't, once I've clicked on that, notice there's an account in it. I cannot delete that account, no matter how hard I try, okay? So now once I move the expenses out of there and back up here or into one of the other subtotals, I can now go down, click on total new subtotal, delete subtotal is available, and that subtotal is gone. Okay? Folks, you got in your help files, you've got this topic as well. So if here we are on our subtotals window, if we hit F1 on our screen, we allow our blocked content on our there, and here's our help topic on subtotals. These should be right up to date for you if you're on version 20 or 21. If you have any other earlier version, they should be there, but it may not be exactly the same. But in your current version, it should just open right to that help topic as well. Okay? All right. So that's our webinar event for the day today. Let me see. I don't see any questions popping in. I hope the event's been helpful for us today. Again, if you don't want to wait for the video of today's event to be out on our website, please go and visit the one that's out there now, as it covers virtually exactly the same topic. Hasn't changed in, you know, several versions. Just might look a little different, you know, with changes in church windows, the screens, and what have you. But the functionality of the subtotals window is exactly the same. Okay. Header text and, you know, naming conventions and adding and reordering, all of that stuff has not changed in a long time. So, all right. Well, I'm not seeing any questions coming in. You're very welcome, Karen. Thank you very much. This is our final webinar event before the Thanksgiving holiday. I hope everybody has a wonderful Thanksgiving with your family, and I hope we will see everyone at a future Church Windows webinar event. I'll go ahead and end the webinar. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.